the reason they're only changing the call to action in the in card, well, one, they have to, but the reason they're not considering speaking more specifically across the whole video is because that shoot and that edit was very specific and crazy expensive. What we're pitching is, instead of like shooting that one expensive ad and then just changing the end card, just changing that call to action, how about we change the whole edit?
Lost in space, but that's okay. Climb aboard the brand spaceship today.
Let's talk about asset libraries.
All right.
You wrote that it is a new way to think about content, which I think is provocative, and I like that. I want to hear more.
The new way to think about content. Asset libraries are your new best friend and also the new way to think about your content. Brands forever have thought about making the most perfect, the best commercial, video, etc. How can I get the best? I need the thing that explains my product perfectly. Oh my God, if I don't get it, how do I go viral? All these things, right? Anyone who's worked in our seat, where you're an agency responding to a company interested in making a video, has heard any of these things, has heard all of these things, really. But the truth is, at Mile 80, and hopefully more and more elsewhere, we like to pitch, okay, great, you need a video. However, we want to make sure that your video includes a lot of evergreen content that you can use over and over and over again, because this is the thing. We're not magicians. We can't guarantee that you go viral. We can't even guarantee that it performs well. What we can is guarantee that we're going to provide killer content based on what you're looking for. And we can make suggestions, and we're really successful at making things work. However, I am a little risk averse. And because of that, I personally try to convince clients that they should be focused on creating an asset library first. It's great that you need that one video for your homepage, but how do the individual pieces of content that create that video, whether it's interviews, B-roll, just B-roll, a whole live production with a bunch of scenarios of people using your product, how do we make sure that all of that footage can be repurposed for everything from social to paid ads to future ads that are selling your product at a discount? The asset library attitude, the asset library angle to content production is about prioritizing a cohesive set of pieces to create more and more content over that one video you want to make today.
That's awesome. Okay, so that leads directly into that. We want to make it clear that this is not a this or that. You can still have your big commercial. It's about the way that you shoot it. It's about the way you think about your big commercial, right, and what comes out of it.
Sometimes when we start to talk asset library, brands will freak out. They'll be like, no, I have a vision. I want this one video. Well, that's awesome. We're happy to come and help you make that vision a reality. Let's talk about how we can move things here or there, twist the storyline, control the scenarios so that we can maximize the content we capture within your budget. So not only do you get that vision you have, but also we start to create this asset library or add to an asset library you already have, so that we can go back and upcycle that content later and utilize it to make new assets in the future. You still get your one commercial, but the individual pieces that created that commercial have the ability to be used for other content in the future or simultaneously.
Yep, that's great.
One thing I want to add is that we talk often in the context of live action. We also do a lot of animation. So asset libraries in the animation world, whether that's 2D or 3D, that can be little animated sequences. That can be individual Illustrator files from your animations. One example of what we do often, this happens all the time. We do a lot of motion design for big events. Right now, we're working on one for Google. So we're going to take static imagery that's already been created and we're going to make it move. Sometimes when we make it move, we actually change how it looks a little bit. Basically, what we create in our motion software is a valuable static image that can then be repurposed back into the keynote presentation or on a screen or in a pamphlet that gets handed out. So it's not just live action when we talk asset libraries, it's also design and animation assets. We always try to think about how does the work we're doing for you create more and more and more and more individual pieces of a puzzle that can be remixed and rematched. Again, we always go back to the Lego concept. You have one Lego set that can be built in one specific way, and it can be also torn apart and built in a different way. However, Once you have 20 Lego sets, you can make all sorts of new pieces of content. And if you follow an aesthetic guideline and you only buy the Lego sets that are police Lego sets, right? All the pieces connect. And that's when we think about the brand guidelines for a specific brand. Repeating colors, repeating shapes. The easing in the motion should be the same. How it looks when letters land on screen, that should be the same across all this content, because then these pieces can be repurposed and reused, and they act as a graphics package in the case of animation, or as individual video files for making any sort of edit you want to make in the future.
Yeah. So, and I come from a marketing background. In my previous company, we had 2 people full time who just went and they shot social content on their iPhones, and they did that every single day. They were always looking for new content to shoot, because we hadn't set up the infrastructure to put together this asset library that we could keep digging into and pulling. So instead, we're paying people to chase content rather than jumping into this treasure trove.
Here's the crazy thing. I think a lot of brands agree with what we're saying, Jared, and have the problem you're speaking to, which is they don't know where the files go. One, as a brand, you're going to have to talk to the agency up front, make sure you have access to the source files. Sometimes they're going to hold those captive. We never do that. It just feels really short-sighted, and I'd rather you come back for the next one for the upcycling, et cetera. That's what we prefer. So first of all, you got to clear that with the agency. And then from there, you do have to have a place you store the files. I figured every brand had this really clearly laid out. Brands are better these days. Most of them have some sort of storage system. I will say that it feels to me like about 4 or 5 years ago, a bunch of different salespeople went to all the big businesses and sold them different like custom things that are really complicated.
You'll need a top-of-the-line machine for that.
And confusing and supposedly more secure, but really just harder to manage. So what we do to make sure we don't have to play that game is we store everything for perpetuity. I would make sure when you engage with an agency you find out that they do that there won't be like a hard drive that gets thrown away or a hard drive that maybe dies in the past, but instead that every single file, every single asset is then uploaded in a place where you have access. It should be a private link, but one that your team knows how to get access to. From there, I would tell brands, you kind of need your own as well. We work with Dropbox, whether it's Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, any of these are going to work, but some place where you can instantly share content that's been created in the past with your new editor or the new team that's working on the new project. To me, there's no reason why let's hypothetically take a business that has a bunch of different business units. We work with a lot of big companies that have thousands of employees. Even at that scale, there should still be a way that business unit A can look up the commercial content made by business unit B and then like send a message, be like, hey, can we use that? And then repurpose it within a video so that everything that's being created builds on top of itself. So you're just building your Lego set.
Yeah, so I want to talk about what an asset library looks like. So we've talked about live action. You mentioned briefly animation design. So, live action design, sound, music, and so how these pieces all come together to give you that infinite stream of content.
An asset library is an organized database of all the audiovisual content you ever make for your brand. It should be able to be easily shared across anyone who ever needs it at your company, whether you're a 2-person company or you're a 100-person company. And frankly, both sides of that spectrum have the same issues in our experience, which is why we just started doing it for people, because we were trying to sell them on things like upcycling and re-editing content they'd shot before. We're like, we don't know where this is, right? So the asset library has to be a database where content lives forever. Generally speaking, that's going to be some sort of online storage system. And there are so many now that I feel like it's pretty obvious. And most of them have become secure enough that unless you're somebody working in banking, the government, or something highly confidential, you probably can get it through your security test.
Give me an example of how I could take a piece of live action footage that we shot and combine that with some, animation elements or graphic design elements to create something new, keeping in mind that both of these things were made for their own individual purposes in the beginning.
Okay, so the hypothetical scenario is we have animation done back in January and new live action footage that we shot, and we want to take the animation. Well, hopefully that animation, let's just say it was made in After Effects. We work in After Effects all the time. Hopefully you have the After Effects file with everything media managed. If you don't want to learn what that means, just tell your agency. You want all the source files collected in a location where you can download them. Now you have that. That's everything that was used to create that animation back in January. You shoot new live action. And really, you just want to have the text styling from January where the text slides in and it says, buy today, 45% off, because that wouldn't happen. That's a really steep discount. But you just want to use your new footage as a background. Well, your editor, hypothetically, even one that's not the highest end, right, is going to be able to go in, take that live action footage from agency A and then animation from agency B and put them together. Now, I will say, if you're going the agency route, finding one agency that can do all of that is also beneficial, because then you end up having aesthetics that match. So this gets into, it's like, yeah, hypothetically, you can take it from all different places and put them together, but different people are going to have different perspectives on what things should look like. So finding that unified team that can maybe do all of the high-end work and then allow your internal team to iterate on it. And all of a sudden you have a completely different ad, and all you've done is taken two disparate files. Right.
Yeah. And so from a marketing perspective, this makes me think, it would be my dream world as a marketing director to say to an editor, hey, this week's call to action, this week's message is this, go make me 5,
Totally. So this is getting into the call to action change has been being done for a long time. There are agencies called versioning agencies, and big businesses spend millions and millions of dollars versioning their big commercials. Right. It's very popularly done in Eastern Europe, where it's a little less expensive than the United States to get editors. And they'll take a US commercial that was made for $1 bajillion and they'll make all sorts of different call to actions. I actually had a company that raised funds specifically to solve this problem. And we use software to automate these types of small changes. That's probably a different episode than this one. But just to say, this is something I've thought about for a long time, which is, as an editor, a lot of times I was being asked like, hey, can I get this so it says euros instead of dollars? What about pounds instead of dollars? And starting out as an editor, you get a lot of those questions. And there's a reason that you get those questions. It's been a long time since we figured out that speaking specifically to a region made sense. However, what we're talking about when creating an asset library is so that you don't just have to do what's been done forever, which is commercial, change the CTA, change the call to action, change the amount of money. We're saying if you really think about how to shoot what you're going to shoot and you get access to the source files, you can actually make new commercials for not much more. The reason they're not considering speaking more specifically across the whole video is because that shoot and that edit was very specific and crazy expensive. What we're pitching is, whether you're Ford or you're a small company, instead of like shooting that one expensive ad and then just changing the end card, just changing that call to action, how about we change the whole edit? How about we have more of the budget in place so that we can have a bunch of different options for perpetuity? And how about we consider the fact that the ad we're shooting today should also look similar in some ways to the one we shot last year, so we can combine all that content and even further iterate on the messaging we deliver to the customer.
Yeah, and that goes back to the initial problem, like assuming that you have the perfect commercial and it's going to register beautifully with the customer. Okay, now I need to change it to euros, and I'm hoping this messaging nails it in Europe too. This gives you the versatility to say, okay, great, we're trying all these for this US audience, but maybe there's a different edit that we tried that works great in Europe.
I imagine it has the Queen on it.
The euro?
Wait.
And you can, iterate on that, iterate on it, and iterate on that.
Yeah, let's also consider the fact that changing the call to action, specifically like changing, for example, dollars to euros, has to happen because people don't pay in Europe with dollars, right? However, TV doesn't have clear signals about how people are reacting. They claim to, but TV ads, it's not really clear. Whereas if you're throwing it into the internet, onto social media, pre-roll on YouTube, any other streaming platform, you're tracking whether or not people click. And that is direct, specific information about the success of a video. So it makes a lot more sense to iterate on the messaging, a lot more sense to iterate on the end card, the call to action, etc., when the signal you're getting back is much clearer about whether or not your goals with the ad were met.
Yeah, totally.
Thanks for watching our video on asset libraries. We're confident that the future of content creation requires considering how each shoot you have, each animation you create services your asset library, services your future content that you make from all the other content you've ever made in order to be everywhere all the time, as we all need to now. Make sure to watch the next video. It's going to blow your mind.
I can't even believe it.